Hi everybody. Today we are going to shoot a video here about my Angelfish tank, and it's probably going to be a pretty good one. I'm finally ready to start making some changes in here. I don't know what I'm going to do yet. I don't really know what this tank is going to morph into over the coming weeks, but it's definitely about to start undergoing some changes. One of the things I had sort of been waiting to happen was my final Bolivian ram to pass away. I knew she was old. I knew it was coming soon. I'd been seeing the signs for the last several weeks. She's been getting more and more listless, and her color was draining. And this morning I came down and she was gone. I found her lying on the bottom. So she was the final inhabitant of the original batch of fish that I put in this tank when I first set it up almost 4 years ago now. So she's actually was one of my oldest fish as well. And now that she's gone, it's, I wasn't really going to get in there and start doing a whole lot when I had a fish that was sick and dying, and the dynamics have changed slightly. So now it's time to start moving forward with this tank. I'm really tired of looking at it. I'm really tired of the issues I'm having with it, as far as a little bit of the green cyanobacteria, and the plants aren't doing well on the bottom. It's just not set up right. I don't have the right substrate in there. I'm not crazy about the decor. I'm not even crazy about all of the inhabitants, but there's not a lot I can do about that at this point. We're just going to do our best and go forward from here. One of the things I do think I'm going to do today is we're going to get in there and we're going to take this branch. That is my last piece of wood that I originally gathered when I first started setting my tanks up. I do have some other tanks that have some of my original wood that I got in that early summer when I was out exploring and collecting wood and rocks all over the place. But that is the last piece I collected from Murphy's Run, which is the stream across the street from my house. So I think the wood's going to stay in there, but this Java here on the end looks absolutely awful, and I think it's just time to scrape all of that off and get this wood cleaned up a little bit. That Anubias looks really good, so I'm going to leave that attached. I'm going to put the wood back in and try to reposition it. I'm really going to get in there and thin out a lot of the floating water sprite in there. It's just getting so thick. You can see how dark it is in there again. And mainly I'm going to get a good siphon in there, and I'm going to siphon out as much of that gravel and white sand as is feasible for today. I'm not going to strip it clean, and I'm going to have to be careful. I don't know how much of that sand is actually supporting any of those rocks. So as the sand starts coming out, the rocks may shift, and I don't know what I'm really going to be getting myself into. But those are my goals, and we're going to do a big water change, obviously, while we're in there. Don't think I'm going to tackle the filter. I did this filter not too long ago, so it shouldn't really need it. And with all the other stuff I've got going on today, why add to the list, So let's get started, and we'll get going on the water change. And as the water's starting to drain, I'll get a bucket and a siphon, and we'll really start pulling some water out of there. But first, I need to check the pH and make sure that that's where I expect it to be, so I know what size water change to be going on with. So let's go over and have a look at that real quick, and then we'll get started. Alright everybody, that's about what I expected. The tank is there on the left, and it's running at about 6.6, and my tap water is there on the right, and that is running at about 7.2. So I will be able to do a fairly significant water change because I'm not that much above neutral that I'm really going to shift the water significantly. So if I do, say, a 30% water change or a 25% water change, I'm really not going to shift that pH from 6.6 to neutral even. It'll still probably be around 6.8 when all is said and done. So I'm not going to stress the fish too much by doing the water change, in the sense that the pH will shift too much, and hopefully I won't stress the fish too much with anything else as far as getting in there and doing all the work and the scrubbing and the cleaning. So let's get started. Now that I know how big of a water change I'm capable of doing, that gives me a little better idea of how much and thorough of a tank cleaning we can do while we're in there. So let's go get started. Alright everybody, I think we're just going to start by using this hose to siphon. It's not a regular gravel vac, so I do have to be careful that no little fish get sucked up in it. But I am going to start just by simply pulling 5 gallons at a time out, or maybe less. We're just going to start drawing a little of this gravel and white sand out of this end of the tank and trying to remove some of this green cyanobacteria in the process. And hopefully I won't disturb the fish too much, and maybe we can do a little more and a little more and see how much we can get out of it before we start refilling the tank back up. Again, I'm not going to be able to do more than maybe a 25% water change, so that branch will be coming out after probably this first bucket. I just want to give myself a little bit of room in the tank to work with, and then we'll go from there. So let's get started and see what we can do with this. Okay, that comes out of there fast. Well, it's clearly going to take more than a couple of bucketfuls to get this done, but it's working very effectively. And in just a few more water changes, I should be able to get a lot of this out of here, or enough of this out of here, that I can actually get on with putting something else in the tank. So like I said, today's just going to begin the process. It's by no means going to finish it. So let me go get this dumped out, and we'll do one more of those. You don't need to see it necessarily, but I'll go ahead and video anyway. We'll see how that goes. And I want to get some of the filth that's out of that corner, and I want to do at least one more 5-gallon bucket, and then we'll start working on that log. Alright everybody, plans have changed a little bit. While I was in the middle of getting started with this, a really big thunderstorm has blown up, and it is really dark outside. We're getting lots of thunder and lightning. So I am just moving right along as fast as I can. I am on a well, so if I lose power, I lose water, and I do not want to be in the middle of this with my tank drained and then not be able to fill it back up again for who knows how long. I do have a generator, but unfortunately when I tried it the other day, it was not running, and I have not yet had time to get out there and tinker with it and get it started. So a fat lot of good it would do me if the power went out right now. I am still draining the tank. I'm going to go a little bit further. I did a ton of work that we can talk about later, but as I said, I want to get moving on this. All I want to do now is wipe down the front glass, and then I'm going to start filling the tank back up, and that will be pretty much the end of it. And once the tank is safely filled, we can go ahead and have a little bit of a discussion about what we've done. But I did do quite a bit in there, and I was able to remove quite a bit of that white sand and gravel. As you can probably already tell, I'm almost down to the black rim over here on the right side of the tank. So let me get going, and we will see what the tank looks like here in a moment. Alright everybody, that is a big difference. I didn't want to do too terribly much while I was in there, just because I don't want to disrupt the tank as far as the biologicals and all of the sort of unseen stuff that goes on in the tank. I'm not going to get into a whole lot of that right now, but I didn't want to strip out the gravel completely. I wouldn't have been able to without doing much more of a water change. Unfortunately, like I said, the weather kind of changed right in the middle of doing that. I did get a little bit of the video as you saw, but I continued to do some work after that. I got the branch pulled out and cleaned up, and I did do one entire bucket of gravel in addition to the one we did on video. So I took 10 gallons of water out that way, and then while I was letting while I was working on the piece of wood, I actually put my Python siphon in there, my Aqueon siphon in there, and let it run into the other room while I was working on that branch a little bit. And then that also was helping to pull some more of the detritus out of the tank, because there was just a ton of filth in there. There still is, really. If you come over and you look down here in the corners anywhere, You can look back there. Anytime the fish swim, it just kicks up a bunch of filth and nastiness. That is my Pictus catfish right there. And if you've watched a lot of my other videos of this tank, I know I don't do a ton of them, but I usually mention how the Chinese algae eater always messes with this Pictus, who for 4 years now has lived in this big cave down here on the end. But I think the Chinese algae eater likes this cave too. It's the prime real estate in the tank. And I guess the Pictus has finally gotten tired of fighting with that stupid Chinese algae eater and has switched residency, and he now spends his time in this cave. So I'm getting a lot less aggression between the two of them and a lot less fighting, but my Pictus has been removed and relocated. So that's just a little side note. What I did with that piece of wood is I pulled the whole branch out. I pulled all of that Java fern off of there, which was just nasty, and it was just, there was so much filth and detritus and stuff just packed into it. As soon as I moved it, it was just like a cloud of filth coming off of it. So I got all that out. That's all in that bucket right there. I've got some floating water Sprite that I pulled out in there, but that is mainly just all that Java. Nasty, nasty pile of junk. So as I went to remove it and I began lifting up the piece of wood, I found that it would not move. It wouldn't budge. So I actually investigated a little bit, and the Anubias has rooted to and between some of the rocks in the tank. So as I pulled the piece of wood out, it actually broke the plant in half, and this part of the Anubias is actually growing on the rocks now. And this main body is attached to this piece of wood, and believe me, it's attached to that piece of wood. It's not just growing around it. It's grown, you know, the roots have dug into that wood. That's not coming off of there. So I just turned the branch around just for a little bit of visual difference in the tank. It changes the way the Anubias looks, and by getting a lot of the tannins and filth out of the water and a lot of the floating stuff, I've let just so much more light in the tank. It just looks a lot better to me. The only thing I'm really unhappy with it about at this point is that white substrate. I really just cannot stand that white substrate. Again, I thought it would be cool when I first put it in there. I quickly realized that I did not like it. You'll notice it's the only tank I have with the white sand in there. Within a week or two of setting up this tank, I realized I really do not like it. So I'm going to continue working on getting that out, but I'm going to have to do so slowly, and I'm going to have to do so carefully. And if I can keep the rocks fairly intact the way they are, I don't see any point in really changing this tank up a whole lot. I like it so much better already just by being so much more open and so much more, you know, space for the fish to swim around in. I just think it looks so much better now that that Java is out of there. So that is pretty much all I really want to do with this tank at this point. I'm not going to change the inhabitants very much. I've been on the fence about that algae eater for like a year now, so I don't want to say I'm going to get rid of that algae eater, because who knows, I probably won't. But I toy with the idea all the time. He just does such a good job of keeping this tank clean. And speaking of the devil, you can see him lying right there on his front doorstep now in his brand new home that he just stole from my Pictus. Like I said, he's a brute. Really obnoxious fish, but boy does he keep the tank clean. I never get in here and do anything to this tank. I rarely even wipe the glass down. I did this time, especially down near the bottom, because so much of that sand had come out. It left all, you know, how that gunk develops on the glass below the line of the sand. So I got in there and I wiped all that down, and of course I wiped the rest of the glass down while I was in there. This is another thing I wanted to point this out. Of course, I did all the main filming yesterday morning. It's now a day later, so I'm trying to just sort of remember where we got started and what we talked about. But I believe I mentioned not being sure how much of these rocks were actually sitting on the substrate versus on the glass. That rock right there gives you an idea of how, as I begin to suck more of that substrate out, that rock is definitely going to shift and fall, and that may cause these rocks to shift or move. So it's going to be a little more careful and slow going as I get down to the you know, more and more of the substrate. But that's my game plan at this point. I am simply going to every time I do a water change on this tank, I'm going to do another bucket or two of that white sand until it's gone, and then I'm going to take the substrate that I like, which is in pretty much all of my other tanks. That's my T-bar tank, and I have it in there, and you can see my T-bar has been working on his earthworks, is building his mountain again. I have it in that tank, I have it in my brackish tank, I darkened these tanks just so that we wouldn't get a lot of glare behind us, but my 125 has it. My gudgeon tank has the sand version of the same planted substrate. My gourami tank has it. And then this tank actually does not. This is my very first tank I set up down here. This is my 29-gallon miscellaneous, and it's got inert gravel, and I'm making quote marks in the air when I say gravel. It's just a dense plastic foam that's painted black, and they call it aquarium gravel, and it's really cheap and inexpensive, but it's completely inert, and that's why you don't see a whole lot of plant life in this tank, because there's nothing for the plants to draw their trace minerals from. This planted substrate, however, is Floormax, and I really like it. It really works well, and that will eventually be in this tank. So picture, if you will, that nice, lovely black substrate in this tank, and suddenly it becomes a lot more attractive tank. So I don't think I have to do a whole lot in the way of rescaping it. I just need to get that damn white sand out of there and put some black stuff in, and boom, we're done. That's going to look awesome. So there's my video. Hope you enjoyed. Hope you enjoyed the big change that happened all of a sudden to that tank. I didn't do a whole lot, actually, but it really did make a huge difference in the way the tank looks and feels. So from here on out, it's going to be a slowly changing and evolving tank until we've got something that looks very much different than that white sandy bottom. So thanks for watching. If you're not already subscribed, please go ahead and do so. As you just saw, I've got lots and lots of tanks, and I've always got something going on somewhere. So if you're subscribed, you won't miss any of it, and you don't want to miss any of it because it's always good stuff. So thanks for watching this one, and I will see you real soon on the next one.